very clear that the economic policies of the Obama administration and this Congress are failing miserably. All one has to do is travel throughout America and talk to an employer, talk to a manufacturer, talk to a service employer, and you'll find out that they are really nervous about this economy. They're pulling back. The statistics are glaringly clear. There's real talk of a double dip. I'll let Doug speak to the probability of that. But take a look at what our government has done in the last 2 years to try and get this economy out of the recession. The $1.1 trillion stimulus, which is what it is when you add the interest spending, has not worked. It has exacerbated our debt problems. The Keynesian experiment, which was more spending, has failed to produce the kinds of jobs. It didn't bring our unemployment down below 8% as it was promised. We are still hovering close to 10%. We are not producing the private sector jobs that we need to be. If we want to get back to our pre-recession unemployment rate, we'd have to create 250,000 jobs every month for 5 years running. And we're not anywhere close to that. So why is that happening? Well, here is what it is. The fiscal policy of our government is going in the exact opposite direction it ought to be going. Borrowing and spending is not working. And if borrowing and spending would be working, we would be at full employment by now because we're borrowing and spending more than we have in a modern era. What is the problem that businesses are experiencing? Number one, massive tax increases are coming in January, followed by another round of tax increases in 2013. The top tax rate on successful small businesses, like subchapter S corporations, goes at 39.6 beginning in January and goes up to 44.8 when you factor in all the other tax increases that have occurred in 2013. So businesses see a much higher tax rate climate. In Wisconsin, after all of this is said and done, the top tax rate on successful small businesses goes up to 58%. And so we see high tax rates coming on the engine of economic growth, successful small businesses. Then you see a regulatory climate that is producing anything but certainty. You have cap-and-trade legislation, which has passed the House, which they're still trying to pass the Senate, which imposes a brand-new energy tax on our economy, but a huge regulatory burden that is very uncertain. You have the health care law that is now being implemented, which over the course of the next 3 or 4 years will result in higher tax rates, deeper cuts to providers in Medicare, and more uncertainty to employers as to the cost that will occur. Premium increases have already been announced, and more premium increases are occurring. More uncertainty as to the cost of health care for employers, which makes it higher costs on employees. And so when we take a look at what has happened with this Congress, the spending and the borrowing, which will put pressure on interest rates, put pressure on inflation in the future, when you take a look at the higher tax rates that are coming, and you take a look at all the things that they're trying to pass, such as cap and trade and other bills, such as the financial regulatory overhaul, it means more expensive credit. It means tighter credit. It means higher interest rates in the future. It means a value of the dollar that is less certain in the future than it would otherwise be. It means a possible bout of high inflation in the medium and long term, and much higher tax rates. And so this is one word describes all of this, which is uncertainty. The American entrepreneur, the American employer, is worried about the cost of government. That is the biggest concern driving this today, and that is something that government controls, meaning Congress and the President could have prevented these things from happening, which could have got us back to the kind of rebound we typically have after a deep recession. Usually in America, when we have deep recessions, or the deeper the recession, the bigger the bounce coming out of it, we should be growing at a very fast pace. We should be growing at 5, 6, 7, even 8%, like we did come out of the 81 recession. Unfortunately, we're going back down to extremely slow growth. To summarize, what I would say is we are basically replicating the kinds of economics that the Japanese practiced in the 1990s, and we are buying ourselves our own lost decade. We could have come out of this recession in a much more vibrant way if we had the right fiscal policies in place, if we had the right monetary policies in place. Unfortunately, we don't, and this is why many people see that we could have our own lost decade. What's worse is with the lost decade in America, what is backing that up is an entitlement and a fiscal explosion that will give us a lost generation. And so with lost decade economics, which is giving us high unemployment, uncertainty in the business climate, and so much joblessness, that what is behind that is a fiscal explosion of our entitlements, which will give us such a mountain of debt, such a mountain of interest payments, that traps us into a future where the next generation has a lower standard of living, where we sever that legacy, where the next generation is clearly worse off than we are today. We've never done that in this country before. But if we don't watch it, these fiscal policies that our government is currently pursuing will not only give us a lost decade, but will lead to a lost generation. We need to reverse course. We need to change Congress, and we need to change the White House to get that better.